Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to take another look at the Aurora Knife Tool Truffles. I reviewed this one back when the original pre-order was available on the Kickstarter campaign for this exact knife, and I like the knife. I'm not a huge Tonto fan, that's why I decided to pass on it, but I was very interested to see what this thing would slice like because it's nice and thinly ground, like real nice and thin. Feels good, and he's got a second pre-sale going on. I think the early bird's already passed, but there's a new Kickstarter campaign going on for the Truffles second round, and he's gonna have this OG version and also one called the Dark Truffles. I'll try to pop that up on the screen. And being last time he only had, I think, one prototype and it had a lot more people to go to, it made more sense not to test it at that time. I did a little bit of stuff with it just to feel the in-hand feeling. And this time he said to go crazy, so I did a good bit more than I normally do with a knife that is sent in, that I'm going to be sending back, of course. But it's a nice full-size knife coming in at about 8.22 inches long, around a 3.5-inch Tonto blade. And it's a compound ground blade. You have a deep hollow grind here and a flat grind up here at the front. And what I like about this particular Tonto blade is most of the time the flat ground section on Tontos is usually super beefy, so they're not the best slicing tool. This one, you have this high flat that comes down to around 13 thousandths behind the edge, and then it transitions to this flat grind, and it still comes in at around 16 thousandths at the thickest portion. So both should slice very, very well. This is in S35VN steel. He kept the blade completely sterile, nice satin finish. It is a fingerprint magnet though. You have a long blade hole, should be easy to actuate. We'll talk about that after we do the testing. You have a good sharpening tool. You can see that plunge comes right there to where my fingernail is. You should have all that sharpening light before to widen on you. And being this is a hollow grind, all this section, it goes up the good bit of the blade before it even gets to like 20 thousandths. It's about, think, like right there. So you're gonna have tons of sharpening light before it'll even thicken up on you. That's why I like a good hollow grind. And another thing that we'll talk about after we do the testing is the unique locking system. This one, to my understanding, was one of the first pivot locks that we kind of seen in the community for a while. They had like the Boss lock or whatever. What is it, the Paul lock? I forgot what it was. But this one is pretty much a button actuated liner lock. I talked more in depth about it in the full review, which I will link that probably down below, and then at the end of the video it'll probably pop up on the screen if I remember to do so. But if you want a more in-depth look, definitely go check out that review. Only jimping you have is the jimping back here. That's more for the front flipper, but we'll see if it's needed in the testing at all. So why don't we get right into it. Man, so far it's slicing just like I expected it to with the type of geometry this one has. It came with an outstanding edge out of box. I'm really hoping it holds this edge all the way to the end. It is S35VN, so we might be pushing this one to the max. I'm adding a good bit more cardboard, and we will try to cut a little more sisal rope than we normally do, but the entire time I was doing this, it did not feel like it was letting up at all. And, you know, it's definitely S35VN. I've had some good experiences. I forget the last really good experience I had with S35VN was the Flytanium Arcade, but it had nowhere near this nice geometry. Now, the straight edge this straight edge Tonto is really going to perform excellent at this type of stuff because of that straight edge. And you can use that secondary tip for things. Now, this is where I kind of struggle. Anytime I have a straight edge and I'm doing this testing, I end up getting it wrong, and I end up going too hard into the wood. And then my dumb self, I did not notice that knot right there, so it's kind of skating off that spot. And I was like, what in the world? I thought the edge was gone, but no, it was just that knot. Once I move around it, it's no problem whatsoever. And I got to tell you, right here, I am bearing down with all my might into this wood. Nice and comfortable, especially being that it's pretty much flat scales. They got some nice chamfering going on. Pocket clip was comfortable. And you're going to see me right here. I think I tried to stay the entire time I do the sisal rope either in the transition spot are in the tanto portion, that flat ground portion of this knife. Just so I know I'm isolating a specific portion of that edge, and we'll see, you know, if it starts to slack off. But right off the back, I noticed it's really doing well. The first few cuts, I always try to gauge how much pressure I'm going to need to get through the rope. That depends on the sharpness and usually how thin it is, how thin the edge bevel is. But both of those must be a-okay because I got the correct pressure. And I'll be honest, I've tested a good bit of tantos, and majority of them are so thick up there in that front portion because they want that extra strength, that it is an absolute nightmare to do this test with. Not the case with this one. I was actually excited about this one enough to where I ended up, I think I had 3 separate pieces of rope. I had 2 of them, one for the test after I finished this one that I had cut, that I grabbed, and then the following day I grabbed another whole section and did that one as well. We end up with all the pieces I got, we're right at 300. I think we're at like 286 or something like that, plus all the other stuff that we're gonna cut, and I thought it did phenomenal. Without speeding this video up, we had 32 minutes of non-stop cutting pretty much. So, and I know it's hard to gauge whenever I have it like this sped up 4 times, just so this video wouldn't be an hour long. But yeah, almost 35 minutes of solid cutting. And I don't have any blisters. So I'd say that's a testament to the knife. He said he built the knife to be a user, and I think he did a good job at that. You know, if he would have made that front portion real thick, I wouldn't have wanted to use it. That's usually why I don't choose to buy tantos. Plus, they're not always conducive to the stuff I do. I like something with a little bit more versatility, even though a tanto has, you know, you have the belly and you have the flat portion. So, you know, it just depends on the type of stuff you're cutting, because you don't have a really long belly, should I say. But all thin, and definitely impressed up until I get finished with this 1/2-inch sisal rope. Yeah, like I can't even, I'm trying to think right now, I can't even recall the last tanto that I enjoyed testing. So, good job. Michael did an excellent job with that, getting them to grind it nice and thin. And these are at 60 HRC, and I would have to, if I had to guess, I would say that's spot on. And look, I'm using a lot of that same portion with all this stuff, and it's still blasting through it. I mean, nothing's slowing it down. Usually that portion is a nightmare also with the tanto edge, but 10-ounce denim blasting through it. I would say I would give this an A++. So if you want a great tanto user that slices really well, then I would go ahead and get yourself on that Kickstarter. Hope y'all enjoyed that testing. I enjoyed doing it, especially how well this one performed. One other place this knife shined is the action. It has the trifecta. You have a flipper, front flipper, and this large blade hole. The flipper works great. That blade hole is my favorite. It rockets out. You can slow roll it if you want. And then the front flipper, I can do it, but I'm not the best front flipper. The flipper and the blade hole is my go-to means to deploy the knife. Nice and smooth. Like I said earlier, it has a pivot lock. He's calling it the roundhouse lock. The lock itself was designed by Frank Shee. It's also on the DEF CON Fulcrum, I think it is. And it's a button actuated aligner lock that pretty much has a fulcrum spot. You have a pinch spot. I talk about it a lot more in the full review, so if you want to check that portion out, you definitely can. But you just press that button, keeps your fingers out of the way of the blade path when closing, and it's nice and smooth. You don't have to worry about your finger coming in contact with any frame lock or anything. And you can see right here, you push that and it pulls that lock out of the way. You have an all titanium frame. All your hardware is Torx T8. You have a mill titanium pocket clip that is reversible. It's not deep carry. You have about that much sticking out. Blade centering is right down the pipe. The lockup, super tight lockup. No movement whatsoever. I mean, bank vault. Nice. Very nice job. Now for some quick size comparisons, we have the Spyderco Capara and the Bag Knives Osteo. These two are almost identical in length. Next, we have the Ontario Rat 1 and 2. The Rat 1 is just a hair longer. And lastly, it's very similar in length to the Spyderco PM2 and dwarfs the Power 3. Nitpicks and complaints, I didn't really have much in the first place. Now that I can see the performances blade, that is something really to be excited about. It has a good sharpening choil. It was nice and comfortable for my medium-sized hands. I had no hot spots to speak of. It uses all T8 hardware. It's got an interesting lock. Nothing really that I can complain about in this one. I don't love the satin finish, especially for a user. I would have much preferred a good stone wash, but that's definitely not hurting the functionality of the knife. Other than that, if you're looking for something kind of unique with this roundhouse lock, nice safe lock, nice and fidgety, comfortable in hand, and a Tonto that performs not just here, but up here in the front as well, then yeah, I think this would be a really good option. If you're interested in one of these, I will have the link to the Kickstarter campaign down below in the description. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave those down below. I hope every one of y'all is having an absolute amazing day. I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.